Okay, let's dive into this. We're talking about Apple. You know, the company that's practically built its empire on perfection, on secrecy, and on products that just work. So how on earth did this titan of tech get caught so flat-footed in the biggest technological shift of a generation, generative AI? A year after their big reveal, Apple intelligence is bogged down by delays, lawsuits, and reports of completely staged demos. It's a rare, totally un-Apple-like stumble, and we're going to break down exactly how it happened.
So this whole story really kicks off with the promise. At their big worldwide developers conference, Apple painted this beautiful picture of a seamless AI future, one that's woven right into your devices. But as it turns out, what we all saw on screen and what was actually happening behind the scenes, well, they were two very, very different realities.
And look, this isn't just a few tech journalists being critical. This right here, this is the cold, hard language of the law. This quote comes from one of at least 3 class action lawsuits that have been slapped on Apple for false advertising. The accusation is pretty straightforward. They promised this revolutionary AI, they sold phones based on that promise, and then they just didn't deliver.
This right here is the absolute core of the problem. A report from The Information laid it all out. This wasn't just a simple case of a few features being a little late. Nope. The report alleged that the big, impressive AI presentation we all saw was basically a simulation, a movie really, of a product that didn't actually exist in that form.
Let's actually break down that demo, because it's kind of wild. You remember that super slick moment where Siri pulls up flight info, then checks your messages for lunch plans, and then automatically maps a route? That whole sequence, the absolute centerpiece of the presentation, had apparently never once run on a real test version of the software. The engineers who worked on it had never even seen it work. You know what the only part of that whole complex system was real? The little pulsing rainbow ribbon around the screen. That's it.
And this just shows you how deep the disconnect really was. This wasn't just marketing getting a little ahead of the engineers. We're talking about Craig Federighi, Apple's head of software. He was apparently shocked when he got a pre-release version on his own phone because it couldn't do most of the things his own company had just shown off to the entire world.
So why is this such a massive deal? I mean, companies miss deadlines all the time, right? Well, it's because this seems to go against the very DNA of the company. It completely breaks the fundamental strategy that made Apple one of the most valuable companies in history.
You know the Apple playbook. It's legendary. They didn't invent the MP3 player or the smartphone or the smartwatch. What they do is they wait. They watch other companies pioneer the tech, make all the early mistakes, and then they swoop in with the iPod, the iPhone, the Apple Watch, products so polished and so intuitive they feel like the first ones that actually got it right. That's their entire brand. But with AI, that playbook just completely fell apart. When ChatGPT launched, Google, they had a moment of panic, but then they regrouped fast. They launched Bard, then Gemini, and they started plugging AI into everything. Apple, on the other hand, was just silent. They got into the race late, and as we've seen, they're now leaning on OpenAI's tech just to get some of their first features out the door.
And this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? This wasn't just a missed deadline. This was a systemic failure that was years in the making, and it was apparently rooted in some bitter infighting, deep mistrust, and massive strategic blunders. So let's peel back the curtain.
To really understand Apple's AI problems today, you have to go all the way back to the beginning, back to the one tool that should have given them a decade-long head start, Siri. From the moment Apple bought it back in 2011, Siri's story has been one of total chaos. I mean, just look at this timeline. It's a revolving door of leadership. After Steve Jobs passed away, the original vision for Siri was basically lost. Then came the disastrous Apple Maps launch in 2012, and the executives in charge got fired. They brought in a new leader from Amazon, but the team splintered and key engineers left. Finally, in 2018, they poached the AI chief from Google, John Giannandrea, or JG. This was supposed to be the moment they finally got serious. But reports suggest this didn't unify the effort at all. Instead, it created these deep internal divisions. Apple basically ended up with 2 competing AI teams. You had Gigi's official Siri and machine learning division, and then you had this parallel group called Intelligent Systems, which was quietly built by the head of software, Craig Federighi, reportedly because he just didn't trust the official team's progress.
And the tension between them was apparently very real. Engineers working under Federighi reportedly came up with a nickname for JG's division. They called it Aimless. Just think about that for a second. 2 teams, inside the same company, building the same technology, fighting over money, direction, and marketing, with one side openly mocking the other. How could you possibly make progress like that? So, while Apple was dealing with all this internal drama, the entire tech world was about to be turned upside down. The launch of ChatGPT didn't create Apple's problems, but it sure threw a massive spotlight right on them. This was the moment, the inflection point. The large language model boom kicked off, and every single major tech company knew right then that the game had completely changed. Well, almost everyone.
This is so critical. At the very moment the AI revolution was igniting, Apple's AI chief was reportedly downplaying the whole thing. John Giannandrea allegedly insisted that these models had limited utility. He kept the team focused on Apple's own internal tools, which reports say were just constantly falling short of what ChatGPT could do. That decision would have some huge consequences.
And that decision had a clear domino effect. With leadership reportedly not seeing the urgency, the AI team's chip budget got cut. Engineers were told to do more with less. Their data centers were running on aging hardware, and get this, they even had to go to competitors like Google and Amazon to beg for enough computing power to train their models. It put them at a massive disadvantage.
So eventually, all that internal dysfunction and all those strategic errors led to the inevitable public failure. But the story doesn't end there. Now Apple has to deal with the fallout and somehow try to chart a new course forward.
The consequences became crystal clear. In early 2025, control of Siri was reportedly taken away from JJ and handed to Mike Rockwell. That's the executive known for actually delivering the incredibly complex Vision Pro. At the same time, the lawsuits started piling up, and the company's carefully crafted image of perfection took a major hit.
Then, at their next developer conference, Apple announced a massive visual overhaul for all its software, inspired by the glassy look of Vision OS. Now, it's a huge undertaking, for sure, but some savvy observers have started to wonder, could this also be a clever way to distract everyone from the glaring, ongoing failures of Apple Intelligence?
And that really brings us to the final question. With the buggy software, this whole AI fiasco, and the struggles of the Vision Pro, a lot of people are asking if this is just a temporary stumble for Apple or if it's a sign of something much deeper. Is the company that basically defined the 21st century now losing that singular focus and vision that made it so great? I guess only time will tell.